welcome to Bibliophiles Anonymous, episode 56. I'm Denise.
And I'm Jess.
And tonight we have an interesting topic, I think, and it's probably one, actually, it's surprisingly enough, it's one that I got from my husband. It was his idea.
A very good one, I believe.
Yeah, and it was something he mentioned, it was a while ago, actually, and he said, that might be something you want to talk about on your podcast. And I just sat there for a second, I was like, that's a really good idea. And I shouldn't have sounded so surprised. I think he might have been a little bit offended. But, anyway, so we are talking about books or series that we wish had continued. For example, if it was a series, it's where we wish it's complete, but we wish that it had kept going. Or if it's a standalone book, we wish that it had a sequel or was part of a series because we just didn't get enough of it, and we want to know what happened afterwards and where the story kept going. And right. I know there have been several books and series for that matter where I've finished it and put it down and just been like, what? No.
Yeah.
I'm not ready to leave yet.
I've had that happen quite a few times.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about that in just a minute. But first, we're going to talk about what we are reading right now.
Well, I finished Of Shadowborn. And it broke my brain.
I know. You Facebooked me so many times on that one, and it was so funny.
I mean, that one really broke my brain, and I really need book 5.
I saw that, and you have no idea how happy it made me.
I mean, I finished it at work, and I'm just like, what? I'm like, oh, God, I need the next one, like, now.
I know. See, I love when books do that to me, but I hate when they do that, and then I have to go back out into the regular world and act like a human.
Yeah.
Because I can't remember which book it was now, but it was one of the Newsflesh books by Mira Grant. It might have been the second one.
I think it was.
Because I finished it on my lunch break. Like, I was almost late coming back from lunch trying to finish it because it's like, oh my gosh, what the heck. And then, like, the last 2 sentences, like, it broke my brain, like you said. That's a perfect analogy. I just sat there and stared at it for like 2 full minutes. It's like, that makes absolutely no sense, but at the same time kind of perfect sense, and oh my God, what just happened? And then I had to go back to work and spend the next 5 hours pretending like everything was fine.
Yeah, I mean,
but it was not fine.
I don't want to give away what I said, but I think the most brain-breaking moment was the first message I sent you.
Was that about certain other supernatural creatures?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Seriously, all I wanted to do the rest of the night was, oh my God! I wanted to tell everybody that walked by, but nobody would understand.
Yeah, that was the thing, too. It's like, you can never explain this to, most of the people around you, because you could try to, but then they would be like, oh, that's nice. But, no, yeah, I understand.
Yeah. So,
because it's my fault you're in this predicament.
Yes, it is.
You're welcome.
After I finished that, I was like, what am I going to read next? And at first, it was a toss-up between finishing City of Glass, which I really need to do, starting Iced by Karen Marie Moning, which continues the Fever series that I read a while back, except it's following a different character from that series now, and it's a sequel. Trilogy following a different character. And something else. Oh, Charmfall by Chloe Neal, which I ended up reading none of the above. I'm reading The Girl in the Steel Corset by Katie Cross because I have it on my phone and I can read it at work very easily.
Well, we had discussed reading that one for the podcast at some point.
Yeah.
So maybe we ought to think about doing that.
Yeah. Well, I've barely started. I haven't read that much of it, so.
Okay.
But so far it's very interesting. It's sort of a steampunky type thing.
Right.
And I'm not entirely sure where this steel corset business is going to come in yet, but there's definitely magic.
Okay, we like magic.
and definitely a badass heroine in this one.
We like those too.
Yeah. So I'm hoping, fingers crossed, that this one's gonna be good. And
Cool.
there's a whole trilogy and then like 3 novellas, I think. So I've got the main books. And I've got one of the novellas. I need to get the other 2.
Okay.
But that's what I'm reading now. And at some point I will actually get back to reading the Silmarillion. But that one, you kind of have to read that one in chunks because it's an information dump.
Well, yeah, it's so densely packed with stuff.
Yeah, which listening to the Silmarillion seminars from the Tolkien professor helped sort of disseminate that information and make it a little less, what do I do with this?
Right.
But still, it's a lot to take in. And after the whole thing where I called Feanor an asshat on Tumblr and got crucified,
Yeah.
just like, yeah, I need to take a break from this before I really make somebody mad. So, yeah. I will probably end up reading all of the Steampunk Chronicles, which is the series that Girl in Steel Corset is in. Because I have them all on my phone, so I'll probably read all 3 of those before I move on to something else. Of course, this is me. Something shiny will probably float by.
Right.
And I'll, give up in the middle of book 2. Unless they're, as good as the Shadow World books, because, I didn't want to stop reading those to read The Magicians for the podcast.
Yeah. They tend to grab you really,
Yeah.
really strongly and just don't let go.
So, yes, Diane Sylvan, we want book 5, and we want it now. Actually, we
Yeah.
want it yesterday.
Yes, we do.
Because, oh my God, you broke my brain.
That makes me so happy. Okay, I am reading, here's what happened. I picked up a book over at my McKay's, Edward McKay's, and it's called Divergent by Veronica Roth. And unless you've been living under a rock, you've at least heard of this book series because it's getting a lot of hype right now. Even if you haven't read it, you've at least heard it or seen it somewhere. I finished, and I thought that there's a 3rd book, and I think it's just a trilogy. But I thought that the 3rd book was coming out next month. Yeah, actually, it came out this past Tuesday. And I happened to just have finished book 2, which is Insurgent. So I just today started book 3, Allegiant. Gotta love Kindle because that's where I got it and was able to get it right away because I think a couple of the places, I mean, it's been pre-ordered all over the place, and I know that something really, really major is going to happen at the end of this book because, see, whenever there's something that's really big, hyped, a major literary kind of thing like this, which they're kind of treating it the same way, like the Hunger Games trilogy a little bit. Yeah. And there are some similarities. It definitely has a similar feel to it. It's very dystopian, but it's at the same time it's not like Hunger Games at all. It's just kind of got that same vibe. But I was on Twitter today, and apparently the author has been getting death threats. For what she did at the end of book 3.
That's never good.
No, because there's a lot of other authors who are kind of speaking out saying, guys, it's a book. And we appreciate that you're this passionate about it, but it's a book.
Yeah, see, a similar thing happened to Mercedes Lackey.
Yeah.
With her Diana Treguard books, which she had plans to write several of and quit writing after 3 because of the death threats.
Well, this is the last book in this series, and I don't know what happened. I have avoided spoilers so far, although I know that they are out there because I've seen other people complain. But I'm really curious to see where this is going because it's been a really good series so far. It's a really interesting kind of concept and world that she's put together, and I want to see where it ends up, and I want to see what the big deal is, why everybody's so upset.
It's definitely on my to-read list,
Oh, I think you would like it.
but, I have a lot of other stuff on my to-read list as well.
Yeah. It's got another pretty good kick-ass heroine, so
Those are,
uh yeah. She's very Katnissy. Only she doesn't use a bow and arrow, she uses a gun.
hmm.
And she will shoot you. Well, actually she's going through a period right now where she had to shoot a friend of hers, and so right now she's actually having a really hard time holding a gun because she's a bit traumatized. But um,
It happens.
that's a whole long story within a story. But yeah, so I definitely recommend those because they're really good. And that's really been the main thing that I've been reading because I just kind of got drawn into it, and I've been not focusing on much else at
I
the
like
moment.
big Shadow World books.
Yeah. Um, and like you said, this had been something that was on my to be read pile for a while, especially since I had found the first book for cheap. Um, so it was something I had heard a lot of people, several of the people whose blogs I follow and who follow my blog, and we kind of comment back and forth. Several of them were like, "Oh my gosh, you need to read Divergent. Oh my gosh, need to read these. They're so good." And I we know what kind of books you like, so you will definitely like these, kind of a situation. And they were right. They were very, very right. But yeah, I need to know what happens at the end of Allegiant because it's got a whole bunch of people upset, and that makes me a little nervous
Yeah,
because it's a very tense situation that's going on right now.
this one may break your brain too.
Well, it already sort of has, and I'm only about a third of the way through, and
Oh,
that
you
just
got
makes me even more scared.
when that starts early.
Yeah. Well, that was just it. It was like part of what I would have thought was like the climax happened, and I checked where I was. I'm like, I haven't been reading this for that long, and I check on Kindle. It says your percentage, and it's like 19%. I'm like, what? Well, dang, where else is she gonna go? And
Real.
I mean, the place where I thought logically it was gonna end up happened within the first quarter of the book, and so I'm like, okay, well, that basically means that any expectation I have, just throw that right out the window because she blew right past that and kept on going. I mean, but yeah, I'm enjoying them a lot, in case you couldn't tell.
Yeah.
But anyway, so let's go ahead and move into our topic. And from what you told me, you have a list.
I have a list.
So if you would like, you can go first.
Um, the first one that I've always really wished there was more of is The Redemption of Althalis by David Eddings. And I know a lot of Eddings fans hated this book,
Me included.
but I loved it. And I don't disagree that it is basically him plagiarizing himself. I don't disagree that it is very similar to his other books, but it makes me laugh. And I love Emmy, even if she does suffer from Polyera syndrome. But I've always thought that it had the potential to have been a series instead of a standalone novel. Though had it been a series, I probably would have hated it because I wasn't too fond of the Dreamers. But I've always wanted more of that story, more snark from Emmy and Althalis. I've always liked it.
Well, and I think maybe and he didn't have to write it in like a 5 book series. Probably could have done it in maybe 3 parts. Because one of my main complaints with that book is that it was kind of going on and on and on, and then all of a sudden it was like, we need an ending. Let's rush everything together in like the last 2 chapters and kind of throw together an ending.
Yeah.
It was almost like you could tell that he's used to writing in a much longer format.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it was like, oh crap, this is my standalone. And I don't say this to say anything bad about David Eddings, wherever he is. He should know that I love him, but it just, that wasn't my favorite.
Yeah, I mean, we sort of worship at the altar of Eddings.
We do.
But, and I agree the book had flaws. But the biggest thing the book has going for it is it makes me laugh. I mean,
It has its moments. I will give you that.
it literally makes me laugh out loud because I remember when my friend Jenny Lee was living with me, and I was rereading it for, I don't know, the 10th time. And I'm laying in my bed reading one day, and at the time, she and I were sharing a bathroom because the shower was messed up in the spare bathroom. And she was in the bathroom fixing her hair, doing her makeup. I don't know what she was doing. But anyway, I started laughing, and she sticks her head out the bathroom door and looks at me and says, "Why are you laughing?" I said, "At this book." She's like, "A book made you laugh?"
Why is that so unusual?
I'm like, "Yes, Jenny, books can be funny."
Books can be hilarious.
Apparently, she thought that was just the weirdest thing ever.
Okay, I think that's the weirdest thing ever.
I thought it was kind of weird too. I was like, yeah, this is like, the 10th time I've read it, and it makes me laugh every time. She's like, "You've read it that much. Why would you read it again?" I'm like, "Because it's good."
Who are these people and why are we friends
She,
with them?
she's not a reader.
Oh well.
But
It happens among the best of people.
yeah, it does. But yeah, I've always wished that there was more to that story because I mean, Alphonsus goes back in time and he's supposed to be this master thief. I think the opening of the book was rushed as well
Mhm.
because he's supposed to be this great thief, but we don't really get any details of him being this great thief.
True.
So I think, we could have expanded the beginning and the ending where things get a little rushed and crowded and made it a trilogy and it would have been much better.
It would have been interesting to see.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's my first one.
All right. Well, my big one, I was trying to decide whether I wanted to say it first or if I wanted to say it last. I'm going to go ahead and say it first because I know that this is one that probably a lot of people feel the same way about. So I'm just going to put it out there. Harry Potter.
That's on my list too.
Yeah, see, and I'm not even picky about it. I don't care. It could be anything, really. It could be a continuation of what happens with Harry, Ron, and Hermione once they're older and doing whatever it is that they're doing. It could be what happens with their kids. I would really love to get more of like a prequel. Like it doesn't have to be a sequel. It can be a prequel and do like the Marauders era. That
Yeah.
would be so awesome. Now it's probably not going to happen, but
Well, I don't know.
there's
With this whole Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them thing,
see that has given me a little bit of hope. Just because all of a sudden it was like this door that had been closed for a while because she said there was definitely not going to be any more Harry Potter books. She was done with that part of her life, and I mean, that's up to her, and she's been a part of that world for how 17 years or something like that. And so obviously if you want to do something different, you have that prerogative, and you know, God bless her for writing those in the first place and all that, but at the same time, it was just like, really, there's not going to be any more? No more nothing? I mean, God, there's so much more story that we just don't know. I mean, we know a little bit. We know the bare bones
yeah,
details, and she gave us a little bit more about what happened after book 7, just a little bit. Um, but there's so much more. I mean, she could write any one of those as a series of however many books she wants, and everybody would just eat it up, you know that. And yeah, that's probably my main one that I wish we had more of. And that's why I know a lot of people were really kind of cynical about this Fantastic Beasts movie. And we're like, oh, well, she's just trying to earn more money and all this other stuff, and it's going to be dumb because it's not like a real book or what have you. But to me, it was like, no, you don't understand.
you're
She's
not.
writing more Harry Potter. And
Exactly.
it may not be about Harry Potter himself, but she's writing about the wizarding world. And maybe that'll just nudge her a little bit to write more about the wizarding world. It's a long shot, I know. But I got my fingers crossed and my toes.
And too, a lot of people are skeptical about it because they're like, this is gonna suck. This is just, them making a cash cow, yada yada. I'm like, to an extent, I agree that this is milking the cash cow. But the fact is, when the project was announced, when they decided to do this, J.K. Rowling took it upon herself to pitch her own idea so that she could write the screenplay for it. So this is, and two, I don't know if any of you, I doubt there are many Harry Potter fans who haven't at least seen a copy of Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them.
Right.
I own it. I bought both of the school books, and I bought Tales of Beedle the Bard.
Right.
But the book is made like a school textbook. There is no plot or story there. So she is essentially creating an entirely new story. And the direction I figure it's going to go is it's going to detail the journey of Newt Scamander and how he came to write the book and follow him as he's researching the book is sort of what I expect.
Right.
So, it's an entirely new story, and since we don't actually have an existing story that we've all read and fallen in love with, we can't sit there and say, oh, but she changed that.
Well, and even if she does change something, it's her doing it. It's not
Right.
It's not Warner Brothers making an executive decision because they want to make the movies only 2 hours long. No, this is, the hand of the master who is changing something because it works better with her story. And who are we to judge at that point?
Right. So I'm reservedly excited about this.
Oh, I am definitely.
Because I think it has the potential to be great. And I'm like you, I kind of hope that if it's well enough received, that maybe she will consider, writing more in the wizarding world, stuff like this even, about somebody like Newt Scamander that's in a completely different part of the world and 60 years or 100 years earlier or whatever.
Right, and and maybe this will be just enough. Since this was her idea, I'm thinking maybe this will be something that will. She decided to do it for a reason. Maybe it was because she missed writing about the wizarding world. It's been a while since the last one came out, and maybe she's had time to step away from it for a little while. She's done a couple of other projects, and now she's maybe ready to come back to it. And this is just kind of getting her feet wet.
Right.
You don't know. It's just, like I said, there's so much more story, and this is why, we don't typically or ever really talk about things like fan fiction and that sort of thing. And I don't read a ton of it, but whenever I do, it's usually Harry Potter fan fiction, just because, well, if she's not going to give us the rest of this story, then other people are trying to fill in the gaps. Right. And most of it's really, really terrible, but there's some that's really good.
Right.
And so, eventually, whether it's through the Pottermore website or whether it's through this big encyclopedia thing that she swears we're going to get someday, but we need to know the rest of the story. Because there's so much more of it there that we don't have.
Right. And it doesn't have to be strictly dealing with the battle against Voldemort. I would be happy if she released a collection of just random short stories about different witches and wizards and the things that they did.
Yeah, that would be good.
It's just, I'm like you, I love that world so much that I want more of it.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And before we, turn this into Harry Potter round 2.
Oh, we could so do that very easily.
Very, very easily. The next book that was a standalone that I wish there was more of was The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern.
That's on my list too.
I figured there would be some overlap here.
just a couple,
So, this book If you haven't read it, then you need to stop listening to this right now and go find this book and read it.
It is so, so good.
This is not the kind of book that I would normally. I mean, if I had picked this up in a bookstore and looked at it, I very seriously doubt that I would have bought it. I read it with another book club from the Black Phoenix Alchemy Lab forum. Black Phoenix Alchemy Lab, they make perfume oils, which I love, 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 love. And we started a group on Goodreads, and this was our first group read. And the reason it was chosen is because the author was a fan of Black Phoenix Alchemy Lab. And I think I mentioned this when we did our podcast.
Yes.
But it's one of those that it doesn't really go anywhere, but it's not about where you go, it's about the journey.
Well, I mean, it kind of does go somewhere. I mean, it's not one of those that just sort of like, goes this stream of consciousness kind of weird. I mean, there's a definite journey with the story of Celia and Marco and then Bailey's story. I mean, so it does have, I mean, it has a beginning and an ending because you have the big contest that's supposed to be going between the two, whatever they are.
The ending is kind of anticlimactic then.
Yeah, kind of.
But it's not important because this woman, I don't know how she does it, but she manages to be more descriptive in fewer words, and it's amazing.
The thing that got me about her writing, and I had heard about her on another podcast that I listened to, and they just raved about this book. And then I also heard about her because she is a big supporter of NaNoWriMo. And she started the Night Circus as, I think, her 2009 NaNoWriMo project. That was where it began. And so, obviously, it went through a whole lot of rewrites after that, because usually what you write during NaNoWriMo is terrible.
Right, that's kind of the point.
Well, the point of NaNoWriMo, and for anybody who doesn't know what that is, it's National Novel Writing Month, and it happens every November. And the goal is to write 50,000 words in 30 days. I have never done it. I have tried 5 or 6 times, and I can't. Real life gets in the way too much, and it's really hard. You have to be extremely dedicated, extremely focused, and neither one of those adjectives applies to me. So basically, she took all of this, and I mean, when you're in that kind of get it on the page, that's basically all NaNoWriMo is. It's about getting all the words out of your head and onto the page without thinking too hard. Because if you stop to try and edit yourself, then you're not going to finish because you're just going to run out of time or you're going to not meet your word count goals. So it's all about just getting as many words onto the page as possible, and then you have something to edit. So I'm sure it went through multiple revisions before it was ever released to the public or even released to an editor or an agent. But the thing that gets me about her stuff is that the way that it appeals to all of the senses.
Right.
I mean, a lot of books are very descriptive and they're very visual. But this one, it was all about the sights and the sounds and the feeling and the, like, with the, I guess for the perfume oils, the smells. I mean, she talked about the way things smelled all the time. So it was very sensory going through this. I mean, you felt like you were there. And you look up from the book and it's like, oh wait, I'm not at the circus. Okay, that's kind of weird. But she's so good at doing that. It's just, it's not even just reading a story. It's more of an experience. But like you, I wanted to know more about it, and she hasn't written anything else. This is her first and only book that's out. And I wanted to know what happened. I didn't want to leave the circus, first of all. I wanted to just, like, run away with the circus. That's what you want to do when you read this book. But I wanted to know what happened when Bailey was in charge of things, sort of.
Again, it's one of those where it doesn't necessarily have to follow these characters. It could be about the circus in another time period. It could be other things that happen at the circus. Kind of like I am with Harry Potter. It doesn't have to be Celia and Marco. It doesn't have to be this particular, because I mean this one is in what, the 1800s.
Yes.
So I mean, you could do a more modern day version of the circus, which would be cool.
Or this contest that was going on, you could do. You find out about, I guess, the history of the. I don't remember her name, but she was the contortionist.
Yeah.
Find out her story. Because, that was kind of a revelation when you found out more about her. Tell more about her story and what she went through. Or, like you said, I don't know how long the circus lasts, since it was created primarily for Celia and Marco to compete, as it were.
Well, that's another good point. This contest has happened several times before, and it's always a different stage. I would like to know about another one of these competitions. Like, what kind of platform was a different one set in?
Right.
If not the Night Circus, then what was it? Because it said that this is not the first time that this has happened.
Right.
So, I would just like something else from her, because I loved her writing so much.
Oh, yeah, definitely, because it was, like I said, there was so, and just like you were saying about the descriptions, and just the way that it was all, like, all five senses, and she's so good at just, like, sucking you into this other world, and making you not want to leave, which is part of why she made both of our lists.
Yes.
Okay, so the next one on my list is actually one that we have talked about recently, and that is Ready Player One by Ernest Cline.
That one wasn't on my list, but I agree.
Well, and we talked about it quite a bit when we had it for the book club, and so much of that book is about the contest itself. Again, another
Right.
contest. And the entire that is the focal point of the entire book. But there's so many other things that are going on, just with the way that society, because this is another book, it's very dystopian, and so many things about the society have crumbled. And that was why this contest was so popular, and I mean, people were willing to kill for it, because there was so much money, and of course money means power, and there was so much on the line. I mean, billions of dollars, and just think what you could do with $1 billion. And
I could do a lot with $1 billion.
I know. And
not ever go to work again.
oh, wouldn't that be nice?
Very.
But they were talking about, or at least Artemis was talking about, that if she won, she was going to take that money and try and do something about where they were, and the situation that the world had become.
Yeah, she wanted to fix the world.
Well, she wanted to at least try. And I know that they said once they got to that point, that they were going to split the money if any of them won, and I'm going to assume, especially given what we know about Wade and Artemis's relationship, we're going to assume that he probably kept that promise. Or at least I'd like to think that about him. And, maybe they were able to fix at least part of the world, or do something, but just because that contest was over, you still had all of this other stuff that was going on. And it also ended very abruptly.
Yeah.
It was like the contest was over, and then like 5 pages later the book was over. It's like, wait, there should be more to it than that.
Yeah, I agree, because I'd kind of like to know more about what the winner did afterwards.
Yeah.
So I agreed that one I would like to have more there too. I didn't even, for some reason that one didn't even cross my mind as I was making my list.
No, I've always thought that about that book. It's like, I mean, the contest was great and the ending was pretty, well, I mean, it wasn't a surprise exactly, but it was pretty dramatic and right down to the wire who's going to win this big contest. But then contest is over, book ends. And it's like, well, no, what happened after that? Because you know that it wasn't just going to be easy, that he was just going to get the money and everything was going to be okay again. No, there was a lot of stuff. I mean, what happened to the big bad guy who had started killing people to try and win the contest?
Yeah.
And what did they do with all that money? And did anybody else come after them? Because all of a sudden now, I mean, they were targets before. Well, now they're still targets because now they have all of this money and control of the oasis. What happens if something does happen to them? There was a lot of questions that were not completely answered. And while I mean the ending was satisfying, I was really happy about the ending, but at the same time I was like, there's a lot of questions. I still want to know. And I expect to be answered. Not that they're going to be answered, but hey.
Yeah. This is true. And, okay. Next. Okay, I have a standalone and a trilogy by the same author that are on my list.
Okay.
And the standalone is Talion Revenant by Michael A. Stackpole.
Oh, that's a good one.
And the trilogy is his Age of Discovery trilogy, and I don't think you've read those.
I've read Talion Revenant because that was actually a Tavern Book Club book long time ago.
Way back then.
Yeah.
I think that was our first one, actually.
It might have been. I know it was a while ago.
That one, it was a very interestingly written book in the way that it kind of shifted from first person to third person point of view, and I thought this would annoy me because it bounced back and forth like that, but it was really, really well done, and I really, really enjoyed the book. And while I don't remember much about the story now because it's been so long since I read it,
Mm-hmm.
I remember that I really enjoyed it, and I remember that I wanted more. And his Age of Discovery series is a very, very interesting trilogy. It's about these brothers who are the grandsons of a magician, and his magic is map magic. Matter of fact, I think the third book is called Cartomancy.
Mm-hmm.
This whole family, they're responsible for the maps that these people have of pretty much the entire known world. And a lot of really weird stuff happens, and somebody becomes a god, and all this. They're really, really good and really, really weird, and I really, really loved them. And I wish there was more than a trilogy of those. I wish that he had written lots and lots of them. But it's a trilogy, and as far as I know, it's finished, and he's not going to write any more of them, which makes me sad. But yeah, there's three of them, and I cannot remember for the life of me what all three of them are called. I think the first one is Cartomancy, and I think one of them is called The New World, and I don't remember what the other one is, but they're really, really, really good. And I only picked them up because I had read Talion by the same author. So those are on my list. And I remember when Marita at the tavern, she read them. And I remember her messaging me, and she's like, "Oh my God!" And they kind of broke her brain. And I'm like, yeah, it's been a while since I read these, so I don't really remember what you're talking about. That's something I need to dust off and reread.
Yeah, I haven't read the trilogy, but Talion Revenant was really, really good.
Yeah, I need to reread that one too. Like I said, it's been so long that I don't remember much about the story other than I wanted more.
Alright, well, the next one that I wanted to say is the His Dark Materials trilogy by Philip Pullman. And these books, well, they've always been a little controversial for
Yep.
the various people who think that it, oh, I don't know, promotes atheism or whatever it is that they don't like about them. I don't know. I try not to read in other things. To me, it's just a really good fantasy story. And if there's other like hidden meanings
Yeah.
in there, I don't really care. Um, I see. To me, it's kind of ridiculous. You can read it like that, or you can read it as just a really good fantasy story, and that's the way that it is, to me anyway. But these books were just, they were so interesting and so well written. And I mean, part of it is kind of this big giant battle of good versus evil, and it's all kind of centered around this one little girl named Lyra and this other boy named Will. And in the ending, it kind of, it's hard to say exactly what it was about the ending that just made me want more, because then I would spoil it, and I don't want to do that. But
Yeah, because I haven't read the third book. I've read the first two.
yeah, and like I said, it's hard to say because there's not a lot that happens that's surprising necessarily. I mean, there's there's the big war against the Magisterium, and there was always a lot of ambiguity because you have these two forces that are fighting each other, but they're both bad and good kind of at the same time. You know that the Magisterium is supposed to be the bad guys, and that Lord Asriel is technically on the good guy's side, but that doesn't mean he's a good person. In fact, there's many reasons why you shouldn't trust him. Um, but at the same time, once all of that is finished, it's one of those situations where just because the war is finished, it doesn't mean that everything's okay.
Right.
And I just wonder, that Lyra and Will have to be part of this new world, and I wonder what happened after that. There's a lot that's going to have to be reassessed. There's a lot of things that are going to have to be rebuilt. There's whole kind of trains of thought that need to be rethought. And it kind of leaves it really wide open as to what happens. And basically, Lyra just says we just need to rebuild it. And that's easy to say, but where is that going to go? What does that mean? And
Yeah.
so that it's not going to be an easy task by any means. And it always made me wonder, well, what does that new world look like? Because the old world, and that's kind of a weird way to describe it, but the world from the first book, or even the first and second book, that it's going to be a lot different from that. But that world was pretty darn cool.
Yeah, I want to date them.
I do too. They're so cool.
Yes, they are.
Because there's some things you kind of learn about them that they're still cool, but there's some things that you kind of learn about them in the third book, and towards the end of the third book especially, some things change. And it's you wonder how that's going to affect, because it's going to mean that Lyra is going to be a different person now than she was throughout the rest of the series. And again, not in a bad way, just different. And how is that going to affect the outcome? There were a lot of things. There was a lot more story that could be told here, and I just wanted to know, now that the revolution is over, what happens next.
Right. One of these days I'll get around to rereading book 1 and 2 and actually read the third one. They're on that list of things I'm going to read before I die. My next one is a series that probably not very many people have heard of. As far as I know, this is the only 3 books this author ever wrote. I stumbled across book 3 at Walmart and picked it up. And when I read it, I was like, I think I'm missing something. I didn't realize it was book 3, and this was before things like Goodreads and fantastic fiction.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I don't think I'm missing something here. I'm pretty sure I'm missing something here. And then I found out it was book 3 in a trilogy. So I hunted down book 1 and 2. And it's the uh, Lennon Kalar trilogy by Elizabeth Kerner. It's about dragons. And it is so good. It's about this woman who she ends up befriending dragons. Actually, she ends up falling in love with a dragon, which really complicates matters.
Well, yeah.
And there's this whole story about these lost dragons that were part. It's just very, very, very good. I don't know where this woman got her ideas, but it was very, very good. And it's been a while since I've read these 2. This is some more that I need to drag out and reread because I fell in love with them the first time. They were so good. And I wish she would write more of these books, of anything, because they were so good.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as I know, that's the only thing she ever wrote.
Well, the last one that I'm going to talk about for this episode is a book called Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell by Susanna Clarke.
I've heard you talk about this one.
This is a really weird book. And I mean that in the best way possible. It's hard to explain. It's obviously it's a fantasy and it's about magicians and the study of magic. And it's extremely detailed. And it's a big book. It is over 1,000 pages long.
Yes, it's a very large book. It's kind of scary.
So, settle down, get a nice comfortable chair, because you'll be sitting in it for a long time. I remember one year I decided I was going to read it early because I wanted to reread it, but I wanted to have time to meet my goal for reading however many books I was going to read that year. So I was like, I need to get this one out of the way because it's going to take me some time. And it's so hard to explain why I wanted it to keep going. But basically, there's a lot of ways where some characters that are not the best people, everybody's kind of ambiguous in that regard anyway, but there's several places where people are kind of stuck in a certain area and they sort of stay that way. And I wanted to know if they stayed there and what exactly that place was, because it was kind of a magical place, and it was a very strange, unexpected magical place. You couldn't really predict anything that happened there, and they're stuck there, so you don't really know what was going to happen to them, and it just kind of ended in a very ambiguous way. And so
Right.
I just wondered what happened to these people.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very large book. I looked at it at the library one day and was going to check it out, and I was like, that's daunting even for me. I like big books. Big books don't scare me. That one kind of scared me.
Yeah, I can see why. It's not for the faint-hearted.
I was like, holy cow. I mean, that's like all of Lord of the Rings in one book.
And the way that it reads almost like an older, maybe 19th century book. So it's got kind of a higher tone to it, kind of,
Right.
if that makes sense. It doesn't read like a modern book, especially like a lot of this young adult stuff, which is really like fast paced, and this book takes its time and lots of it, but it's all really interesting stuff, and it's a really interesting world that's created. I mean, it's not a world, it's supposed to be in England, and I don't remember when it takes place. I want to say the early 1800s, but I could be wrong. It's been a while since I read it. Oh no, I was right. It starts in 1806 in York, England. So it's more, I guess, this magic culture that she created in England during that time period. But it's really good. I mean, like I said, it's a bit daunting, and it is very long, and it's very dense, but it's also really, really good. So, but yeah, it kind of ends not knowing who was the good guy, who was the bad guy, who won, who lost, and, you know, how are they going to get out of this handbasket? Not that
Yeah.
they're not really in a handbasket, that's a metaphor, but, you know, I wanted to know what happened to these people, and in some cases I wanted to know if they learned their lesson, because they really needed to, and
Right.
it was never completely clear whether they did or not.
See, I don't like ambiguous endings. I mean, it's all well and good for authors to say, well, I ended it because I want you to draw your own conclusions. And I'm like, I don't want to draw my conclusions. I want you to tell me how this ends because they're your characters.
Well, and I say ambiguous, it's not that you have to draw your own conclusions, so to speak. I mean, it does have a definite ending, but there's it still does leave you with some questions. It doesn't
See, I
answer
don't like that.
everything, every single
I
thing.
want all the questions answered and tied up with a bow.
Well, sorry.
I mean, I have a great imagination. It's not that I don't, and it's not that I don't like to use my imagination because, if I didn't have an imagination, I'd go crazy. But, I wouldn't read as much as I do if I didn't have an imagination.
True.
It's just, you wrote this story. Don't put the burden of this on my shoulders. You tell me what you intend for, to happen. You tell me, you wrap up, you answer all these questions that you have created in my mind, or it's going to make me insane. I have issues with things like that.
Well, then you might have issues with this, but it's definitely worth a read. Um, it's really, like I said, it's a really interesting idea that she came up with, but there are some people who think that it wasn't quite finished, and at the same time I'm like, she couldn't have written any more. This book is already really long. So I don't know if maybe it
She could she could have made, a trilogy out of that one book.
she probably could have, and who knows. So I don't know for sure if she's, well, according to Wikipedia, it says that she's working on a book that begins a few years afterwards. So
Well, there you go.
maybe there will be more. Who
Maybe
knows?
you'll get your.
I don't remember when this book came out. Oh, 2004. So,
Well, I have a question.
yeah.
Does it count as a completed series that I wish was finished if the author dropped off the face of the earth?
Are you talking about Elizabeth Haydon?
I am. I have mentioned this before, and it makes me batty, but she wrote her Symphony of Ages series, and she wrote The Assassin King, which was supposed to be the start of a new trilogy in the Symphony of Ages in like 2006 or something, and she hasn't been heard from since. It's like she was eaten by a bug. I mean, seriously, her website disappeared. She disappeared. There's no information online. about her, about whether she was sick or anything. There's nothing. She evaporated, literally, into thin air.
That is so weird. I thought that when we talked
I
about
mean,
her before.
I don't know if she found a tree and is climbing along the root, or if she was eaten by a bog, or what happened.
Well, when they were inside the tree and climbing along the roots, that took a very long time.
True.
So maybe that's what happened. Maybe she went and climbed into a tree.
For those who don't know, we are making inside jokes about things that happened in the books.
Yeah, in her books, the characters spent a really, really long time climbing inside a tree. It was a magic tree, granted, but, it took a really long time. So
still, it was a tree. Yeah, I mean, the first time I read it, it didn't bother me so much. The second time I read it, I'm like, God, can we please get out of this tree?
Yeah.
And bogs, some of the characters were these things called furbolgs, and for short, they just call them the bog. And, some of them like to eat people. Grunthor kept threatening to eat Rhapsody. He was joking. He wouldn't really have eaten Rhapsody because he loved Rhapsody like a sister, but still. I don't know. Maybe she was eaten by a bog. I feel like I should make a reference about being eaten by a grue here, but...
That's what I was thinking when you said that.
At least I'm not alone in my geekiness.
No.
But yeah, I would really like to know what happened to her, and I would really like her to, finish the series. Because this is one of those where this was book 1 in what was intended to be a trilogy, so it really doesn't answer any questions.
Right.
It's really annoying, and I would really, somebody else finished this story for all I care. I just want to know where it goes. And I would kind of like to know what happened to her, because seriously, it's like she threw her hands up and gave up. And disappeared, and like, I'm not going to be an author anymore. I don't know. But yeah, I'm sure there are more books that I have read that I wish would continue, but I can't think of them at the moment because I've read a lot of stuff.
Yeah, that's kind of my problem too. And there's also several books. I'm looking around my office and looking at all my bookshelves, and I'm like, well, that one I wish, but I know that there's another book coming out, and well, that one I wish I knew more, but I know there's another book coming out. So
yeah, I tend to read series that are works in progress.
So yeah, and so we just need to be patient. Of course, we've never been good at that, but Not
when it comes to our books, anyway.
No. But yeah, I think that's probably going to do it for us tonight, though. Unless there's another one you wanted to add.
No, I'm good.
Okay. Well, this was a really fun topic, I think, and I would be interested to hear what our listeners think about this topic. If there are any books that you wish had a sequel, or any series that you wish had continued and you wanted to know more about the story or the characters or what have you, please let us know. We would love to hear from you and to hear what you think about this. You can email us. Our email is bibliophiles.podcast@gmail.com. You can also find us on Twitter. We are at BibAnonPodcast. Or you can leave us comments over at our official website, www.bibliophiles-anonymous.com, and let us know what you think. And we don't know for sure what we're talking about next week. We had a nice schedule, and we have pretty much exhausted that schedule, so we're back to flying by the seat of our pants. But, we're good at that.
We should probably sit down and work on another schedule.
I know. Well, we will at some point. But we will be back next week with something.
Yes.
We can promise you that. So, until then, thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you in a week.
Bye.
Bye.